Engineers Podcast, show 220.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode. So, sometimes you join a small company, you have the focus on one product, you learn that, and then another product pops up. Either the company built a new product or they acquired a smaller company, smaller product. What do you do then? I mean, the company is growing. It's a good thing, but now you have more products to learn. How do they work together? How are you going to talk to the customer about those products? Are they integrated with each other or are they totally separate? That's the discussion I have today with Peter Ledger. Peter takes care of, I believe, EMEA for sales engineering for Seismic. Great guy, a lot of knowledge. And we just talk about that, how he joined Seismic, small company, and how it grew. Now they have to have specialized SEs. Do they have to have specialized SEs? So we cover a lot of that. And we also, one interesting topic for me is, for some reason, SE managers seem to be busy in the fourth quarter of the year. Not sure why, they're not selling anything. So that's the kind of the conversation that we talk about in the end. So stay till the end to hear that conversation. Let's just jump in. Mr. Ledger, how you doing?
Very well, thank you, Ramsey. How are you?
I'm good. At the risk of repeating our first 5 minutes of conversation pre-air, I want to say congratulations, first off, for your new role.
Yes, correct.
And I'm not sure everybody knows what your new role is or who you are. So do you mind just introducing yourself to the folks listening?
Sure, absolutely, yes. My name is David Ledger. I am a sales engineer at Seismic. I've been at Seismic for about 3.5 years and helping to grow the UK and the EMEA office. And at the start of this year, I took on the role of RVP for EMEA sales engineering. So I now manage the teams in the UK, France, and Germany, which has been a big change, but also very rewarding for me so far.
Why did you decide to go to Seismic? Where were you before Seismic, and why did you decide to move to Seismic?
Great question. So I was at a fintech. Well, the first job I actually got out of university was at a fintech company called Capital IQ, which was not a sales engineering job. But then I moved into a sales engineering role there after about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. Really enjoyed that. Ended up leading a small team of like 6 sales engineers there. And then basically I had this sort of feeling that I wanted to get into a pure play kind of SaaS company rather than a fintech, which I still enjoyed, but I felt like the way I wanted to take my career is into like a pure SaaS company. And one of my previous managers had moved to Seismic, and at the time when I was looking, kind of recommended the opportunity to me, and had some interview conversations, and the rest was history really after that. And that was about 3.5 years ago. So in high growth SaaS company, land, that feels like a very long time now.
I do believe that. So you didn't start in sales engineering, but you found a role within the same organization, sales engineer. What drew you to that role in that company?
Yeah, this was really interesting. So I was on what was kind of like their graduate scheme, which was essentially like a job in support in like the customer success organization, where you would run the support or help run the support desk, but at the same time learn about different parts of the business and the different jobs within the business and everything like that. And a lot of the standard kind of career routes would be to go into like being an account executive or become an account manager, which is what they kind of call customer success managers. But then I found that there was this small team of like technical specialists that were helping to sell the more technical products in the company. And I genuinely thought at the start that this team was like a unique team that S&P had built just to sell their more technical products. I didn't really think that it linked into like a career or anything like that, but it interested me. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do that route instead, and went into that team. And only after I really joined that team did I find out that, in fact, this is a career called pre-sales or sales engineering. There are people outside of this company who do the same job as you. And yeah, that was how I kind of fell into it, I suppose, I guess.
Okay. And you mentioned products. How many do you remember how many products Fintech had?
At Capital IQ, or it was S&P at the time. Well, there was sort of a couple of platforms, and then within those platforms, because it was a data company, so what they were doing is selling data sets, really. And so there was a couple of platforms, like a database platform and an API platform. But then within those platforms, there were like hundreds of potential products, because there were hundreds of potential data sets that you could buy from the company for like all different use cases. So yeah, it was pretty complicated pretty quickly, but it was a very interesting solution set, I would say, to sell.
Okay. And so Seismic, like 3 years ago, it wasn't that big company, didn't have that many products. So you went from a company that could have a million permutations of products,
yeah,
to a smaller company that had one product at the time. How many products did it have?
Yeah, so I mean, at the time when I joined Seismic, we had one product. It was called Seismic, and yeah, it could be configured in several different ways. Lots of different like features that you could turn on and off, and various things like that. But there was essentially one SKU at Seismic, and obviously over the time I've been here, we've either through organic growth in the product, which has been quite substantial, you know, adding more and more capability onto the core platform, but also by acquiring other businesses to add like complementary products. We've grown into a much broader solution set. So that has really changed the role of the sales engineer at Seismic, and is continuing to change the role of the sales engineer at Seismic, I would say.
It's funny, many people go from like companies that have a million products to a company that have one product because they want that focus, right? And then that company that has one product grows, and then if it's successful, it may have a million products. But let me ask you this: when you went from a company that had a million permutation, multiple SKUs and all that, to a company that had one SKU, what did you have to do to adapt? Like, you didn't have that many options. I don't know if you could. I mean, let me stop there. How did you adapt to having just one product to sell to everybody?
Yeah, so it's interesting because it does give you focus, I would say. It definitely makes you focused on your product knowledge specifically. Like, you have to be a real expert in that one product. But it makes you really concentrate more on the way that you present your product. Because when you have lots and lots of sort of permutations of a solution, the way that you present the product to the customer is usually because, hey, we've customized this awesome set of solutions just for you. Whereas when you have one product that can be configured in lots of different ways, it's about the way you speak to like the use cases that that product has, and the way that you speak to the challenges that the customer's having. So you might present exactly the same product feature to two different customers, but the way that you talk about it is different because it's addressing maybe a slightly different challenge for each of them. So I would say it helps you concentrate more on the way that you're presenting to the customer, because you have to make it fit directly with their challenges.
So how do you decide which way to present to the customers?
You mean in terms of like what to present and like what to focus on and emphasize and things like that?
You just mentioned you're presenting the same feature to two different customers, but you're presenting it in a different way. What guides you to figure out which way you're supposed to present to these customers?
I mean, well, ideally, it's all about really good discovery, because if you've done really good discovery and your account exec's done really good discovery, then you know what the challenges are. So if you know what the challenge is, you can try to show how something addresses that challenge. So it's got to be coming from the customer's perspective, really, in terms of how you're positioning something. You have to know the challenge that it's solving in order to present it differently to different customers, for sure.
And so you mentioned it has to be a good discovery. The discovery is coming from the account managers or the account executives or the SEs?
Mixture, I think. We have a inside sales, outside sales, and sales engineer model. So we have inside sales and outside sales as well. So there's good discovery happening, hopefully, on the first call with the inside salesperson. If that's an outbound or an inbound, it doesn't really matter in terms of getting good information. Obviously, handing that information off to the account executive and the sales engineer. So hopefully, by the time you've done an initial demo, there's some pretty good discovery being done in that phase. But I think discovery is an ongoing process. It's never really finished. So you can't really say, oh, we've discovered everything we need to know. Like, you might think you've presented something which solves a particular problem, and the customer says, well, it kind of does, but there's still this other challenge. And, you ask, and at that point, it's like, right, I've got to ask more questions here. I've got to understand more about what does it not do that they're expecting, right? So it's everyone's responsibility, but it definitely starts with the inside sales team transitioning that information off.
So I when I talk to people who have work for companies that have one product, sometimes it seems easier for the inside salespeople and the account executives to know what questions to ask because one product is one focus. And the SEs aren't really involved in the discovery as much. They come in for the demo, at which point they could do a discovery. Every meeting with a customer is a discovery, even when you're closing the deal, you're trying to discover new opportunities. But as the company grows in terms of products, do you see anything change in terms of inside sales doing discovery properly, or account managers, account executives doing discovery properly, or having to bring in SEs? Did you see anything change, or is it still the same process? Nothing changed?
I guess it's the same process, but it does become more difficult. It becomes broader, becomes tougher to get all of the nuances out that you need or that you would want. But it's also an educational piece, because you can't expect the customer to come to you with a full rundown of every single challenge that they've got, because they're actually trying to learn about all the things that your technology can do, and they don't know what they don't know. Right? So they're coming, I think, based on what I've heard about you, you can help us solve these challenges, but there might be other things, and we want you to tell us actually what those things are. So I think it follows the same process, but there's a lot more sort of information and nuance that could be gathered at different places. And it's the SE's responsibility as well during a demo to ask those things and find out more discovery and find out other use cases.
Are you seeing SEs becoming more involved in the opportunities earlier, or still around the same time? And so why? Either way.
Yeah, good question. Yeah. I think it depends on the kind of segment of the market as well, because we sell to the biggest companies in the world, and we also sell to very small to medium sized enterprises. And in those accounts, in the smaller accounts, probably you're involved for less time. Maybe the account executive has done a first demo themselves because it's a fairly standard use case, and they want to know a specific question, and you come in to answer that specific question, and the deal can be done, fairly quickly. Whereas when you get into the bigger accounts, I would say that SEs get involved earlier, although the deal cycle is obviously longer. So earlier, even if you get involved at the second or third meeting, that deal is going to go on for 6 months. So, in terms of the percentage of time, you're going to be involved earlier. And that's a good thing, because when you're dealing with those bigger accounts, the knowledge of the account and the knowledge of the problems that they're facing is really important throughout the whole process.
Yeah. As a sales engineer, I always preferred getting involved earlier, mainly because if not, I always have to claw my way back and do the same work salesperson did, because we had like a million products also.
Yeah.
A million permutations within each product. But how have you seen the SE skill set change from when you had one product and everybody knew the product inside out, to now having multiple products where they're not as confident in their knowledge in all of the different products?
Yeah, so I think it is still possible for SEs to gain a sort of a pretty good level of mastery in everything, but it takes a lot longer, because even if you go through every single product training, go into every single possible configuration, like you're still not going to hear all of the objections and all of the you don't know everything around the product, like what the competitive spaces and the other complementary products that people might be using and things like that. So I think it becomes quite a difficult sort of mentality shift for sales engineers. We like to think that we're the absolute expert in the product that we sell. And so you have to have this mentality shift of like, well, actually, I don't know everything about everything. I need to get my knowledge up to a certain baseline in everything, and then like learn and go deep in different areas as it's required, but also know where I can get help from. So you have this concept of maybe a specialist in a particular product area that is embedded within the SE team, and you can call on as you need them. So that is a particular example of like companies that we've acquired. The sales engineers from that company that we acquired, or several of these companies that we've acquired actually, have gone on to become kind of overlay specialists in their area across the SE team. And that model has worked particularly well, I think, in terms of being able to get everyone to a baseline and then extend that when you need to with specialists.
So you said a lot of different things that SEs need to know. Two that popped in my mind, like not two that I kind of retranslated from what you're saying, is you mentioned the first thing is you still have to be an expert in everything. And for me, that meant, that means the SE now has to be a time management expert and expert, because now they have to spend time. It's not as easy to learn all the products, and now they have to actually be deliberate about learning the products. So spend more time learning, spend more time saying no to the salesperson so that they can actually learn and help the salesperson in the future. That's one. And the second one is leveraging. A lot of SEs have a hard time leveraging other people, the specialist, the customer success, whatever it is. And I feel like that's a skill that not many people talk about, just leveraging other people to not necessarily dump your work on them, but get help basically, and not try to do everything yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, these are soft skills that are, you're right, probably not as talked about as much, but they're absolutely crucial when the company keeps getting bigger and bigger, right? I mean, the archetypal example is probably something like Salesforce, where a sales engineer at Salesforce can possibly know everything about every product, right? They have to leverage relationships, they have to leverage their network, they have to leverage specialists in certain areas to come up with a cohesive story that they need to tell. So that's a big skill in and of itself. And I think you can help with that. You can formalize the process for engaging with a specialist and make it very seamless. So, we have a very simple way to request specialist help through the CRM system. Somebody gets assigned and all the notes are passed over, and it's just quite simple to do. It's not like you need to go and figure out internally like who the right person is. It's kind of done, that part is done for you. So take away some of the barriers, and I think people will probably get better at it quicker.
Yeah, I need someone to implement that in the companies that I've worked for, because in my previous company, the process was email the specialist, and then email their boss when they say no, and then email their boss when they say no, and then do it yourself, because it's not a big enough deal to bring in the specialist.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we're using a CRM based process essentially to like make a request. That request goes into a queue, and the manager of the specialists finds these things based on workload and balancing deal sizes and all those type of things. Which is actually the same process we use to to assign a sales engineer to a deal in the first place, but we're just using it for a specialist overlay as well.
Okay. So, all right. Based on that, I assume it's kind of a pooled model of sales engineers, and salespeople just request a sales engineer, and whoever shows up, shows up.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pooled model within.
Yeah.
It's a pooled model within reason. I mean, we have like regional splits and some industry split, but generally, yeah, it's a pooled model. And then the specialists are definitely in a pooled model, right? They work across company.
Yeah. So I've written a blog about pooled model versus one-to-one, and I always prefer the one.
Yeah.
But what I love about the pooled model is the fact that there are processes in place to get someone involved, which should then advocate for other areas. Like, hey, I want a product manager. I don't want to have to go email a million person to find out that one product manager.
Yeah, and I think it's critical as you scale as a company to get these processes in place. And shout out to the team in my organization. We call it Global SE Services that do all this for us because it's fantastic. But you need that process, because otherwise it becomes very difficult to scale and it's very tough. I mean, I'll tell you an anecdote of a salesperson I know who works at a company I won't name, but they said that actually they have 2 sales cycles. They have to sell to the customer, and then they have to sell to the sales engineering team and others inside the company. They have to sell the deal to them to get them to help to work on it, which I find to be just bizarre. Like, they shouldn't have to do that, like they should really be getting that support. And if there's no process in place to get that support, firstly, you find that the top performers just get completely slammed and get totally like bottled up by people. So the knowledge is not distributed equally. And secondly, it's just really inefficient because there's hundreds of emails and Slacks go back and forwards every day that just don't need to happen, right? And that's wasting everybody's time.
Yeah, that's fine. You mentioned earlier Salesforce. Salesforce, the way they acquire companies, from what I've seen, is that they just buy a company, say we bought this company, and then the company continues to operate the same way it was. Like Slack, it's still Slack.
Yeah.
Quip is still Quip, I think.
Yeah.
But there are other companies like ServiceNow where they buy a company, don't tell anybody, just remove everything related to that other company, take the IP and integrate it into ServiceNow, and they run business that way. I'm curious where Seismic fits, between those two extremes, and which do you think is better from the SE perspective and the customer's perspective?
Yeah, I think Seismic definitely fits in the category of integrating the products together and integrating the IP together. We want to produce a cohesive enablement product, a very enablement cloud that's really, you can obviously modularize it as a customer, but generally speaking, it's one cohesive product in one cohesive platform. That being said, we're not at the sort of scale of Salesforce where, the technical challenge of integrating Slack into all of the other clouds that Salesforce has is probably pretty mammoth. So it's not reasonable to expect that they would do it within 3 months. So we're still at a size where I would say it's relatively, well, I'm not going to do our engineering team down by saying it's relatively easy, but certainly easier than some of the big acquisitions that happen in the space, right?
Yeah,
relative, it's all relative, right?
Yeah.
But I think the main thing is that from the customer's perspective, it needs to be seamless. It needs to feel like one product. It needs to feel like everything is integrated and orchestrated, and as it should be, right? Like they're not buying 3 things; they're buying one thing. That thing's called Seismic, and it just depends what we put in. That depends on what their needs are and what they've seen in the buying process that would help them.
Okay. And in terms of whenever Seismic acquires a company or builds a new feature, whatever it is, it's your SE team that still has to, even if they bought another company, the other company's SE team will be the overlays, but your SE team will be the main point of contact for the customers, right?
Yeah, and not always. I mean, some of the SEs of companies that we've acquired are now just field sales engineers like everybody else, right? But it sort of makes sense to make some of them specialists because you need that specialist knowledge to remain in the team, right? Absolutely.
And so what do you do for your SEs, or what are your SEs supposed to do to like learn that new part of the product to the point where they can have a conversation with the customer and they can still leverage the specialist, be able to do some of the work themselves?
Yeah, so I actually think this is one area that we're very good at, and Seismic is an enablement product, so we should be quite good at enabling ourselves using our own product, right? You would hope. So I think we're very good at putting together some structured like product knowledge and product onboarding. There's the whole certification paths that we can send people through in terms of gaining product knowledge in different products that we either acquire or even things that we release. If we release a big new product feature, the cadence around enabling people on how to talk about that product feature, how to demonstrate that product feature, what the value of that product feature is, I think all of that is very well thought out in quite a good cadence in terms of when we'll announce it, when we'll do the training, when we'll do the enablement, and then when we'll actually release it into the demo environment. So all of that, I think, is pretty well thought out, actually, as you would hope from an enablement company. We kind of do a decent job of that, I'd say.
That's funny. I actually asked you that question when you were on Chris White's. The
LinkedIn Live thing.
Yeah, you were on his LinkedIn Live. And like, do you use your own product? Because the reason I was asking that, because sometimes I work for companies. In the past, I worked for a company that was selling a device that helps test equipment. And that was one of the products. And then I asked them, like, are we using that product internally to test our other equipment? And they're like, no, it's too expensive. I'm like, seriously?
Yeah,
it's funny. The customer?
It's funny because obviously we are selling a product that we use every day, which I think is a big advantage, as I probably talked about on Chris White's show, because you can infuse all of your meetings and demos with personal examples of how the product helps you, which is really nice. But you also just understand much clearer what the value is of that product. There's people out there who are selling tools that they wouldn't necessarily use every day, and fair enough, right? Like, if you're selling a CPQ system, you might well use that CPQ system, but it's not a part of your day-to-day every day, something like that. But yeah, and it's kind of interesting because obviously we try to use our product to the maximum, but the best ideas often come from customers. They will come up with a new way to use part of the product, and we'll think, well, we never thought of that. Let's try to use that idea ourselves. And that happens more often than you would think.
Yeah, the purpose for my question at the time wasn't about like collecting stories about how we use the product. It was more to see the pain of the customer, if there is any, in using the product. And that way we can talk about it, and that way we can fix it, at least to make it livable for us. But when a company doesn't, there's a chance for a company to use its own product. It doesn't always happen, like you said. If there's a chance and we're not using it because it's too expensive, or it's too complicated, or it's not easy to implement, or not easy to add on at this stage of our existence, then how are you expecting us to sell it to customers in the same boat?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's even you even have to kind of guard against people becoming kind of complacent in terms of the value that your product provides, right? Because, say for instance, at Seismic, we have excellent enablement, and if you need to find a piece of information, it's very simple to do so. If you need to upskill yourself, it's very simple to do so. And I think you take that for granted when you've been working here for a while. You kind of think, but surely this is what working at most companies is like on a subconscious level. And actually, it's not. If you don't have those kind of tools and you don't have that kind of system in place, actually it can be very difficult. And so,
talk to me. I'll tell them how hard it is to find anything on Confluence, SharePoint, Google Drive. I'll talk to them. I'll send them
I'll send them your way, Ramsey.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when we meet with prospects and they're like talking about this big pain, we're like, obviously we know that like this is the challenge that we solve, so we can talk about it intelligently. But sometimes you do have to think, well, yeah, there's companies that don't use this kind of thing and don't have it figured out, and just should remember that, right?
That's funny. All right. There's one question that I have prepared for you, mainly because I'm curious. And last time we were talking
Sure.
in the fourth quarter, and you said you're too busy to talk to me. And as a, as SEs, we generally think, the salesperson is busy. I don't really care. I'm just doing my thing. What do sales SE managers and SE leaders do in the fourth quarter or at the end of each quarter that makes them so busy?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the fourth quarter, for most SaaS companies is the busiest quarter. Definitely in terms of helping out with individual deals, if you're doing that. Obviously, if you're an individual contributor, then the middle part of that quarter is probably the most impactful part. By the time you get to the last few weeks, there might be a few, meetings here and there, but it's getting into the closing motions at that point. I think the biggest thing that SE leaders and SE managers are probably doing in Q4 is gearing up for hiring. And I say that probably because most companies will budget their hiring on like an annual basis. And one of the things that I'm quickly learning is that if you wait until your hiring plan is announced and you get, oh, hey, here's 4 headcount for the year. And then at that point, you start like building up a pipeline of candidates, you're already behind. So in Q4, you should probably be doing some prospecting and looking into your network and doing all the things that you need to do to get a good candidate pipeline for when you do have those open headcount. So as soon as you have them, you can start interviewing straight away and you have a bench of people. I mean, that's the ideal scenario, right? So that's probably a big Q4 activity that a lot of sales managers and sales leaders are doing in terms of getting a good pipeline of candidates ready for the push that's going to come in Q1.
So, like, you're not advertising an open spot, are you? Before you even get headcounts from the management?
No, we wouldn't do that.
How are you like, what does it mean, because when I say prospect,
yeah, good question. Yeah,
job and there's a job description out there and people are applying, but working before that to get there.
So one thing that I actually read in John Kerr's book, which it was about the SE managers handbook, is this concept that hiring is a constant process. It's not something that you do and then you forget about and then you start again and you forget about again. You have to be nurturing candidate relationships the whole time, and that can take a number of forms, right? Like that can be people that you've worked with before, that can be referrals that people give you. I mean, if somebody gives you a referral throughout the year this person's great, they're looking for a new position, or they're interested, or I think they might be interested in Seismic. The worst thing you can do is say, well, we don't have any open spots right now. Like, tell them to come back in 3 months. Like, no, just have the conversation with them now, and understand where they're coming from. Like, understand what they're looking for, and if it's not right now, you'd be amazed how many people can come back to the process because things don't work out with what they're doing or where they're trying to go. So always, you should always be keeping a bench of people, either through your own network, through other people's networks, and trying to keep a bench of people who are interested in open roles that you might have.
Right. So I wrote a blog post 2 years ago for Vivint, and it's called Scouting and Recruiting Sales Engineers Like Athletes. So I'm pretty sure football in the UK is a little bit different, where you have schools for youth and they grow up and then they get picked out of those schools, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, there's a whole like youth academy system, right? Yeah.
Like in the US and Canada, it's more about kids playing in high school, then go to university, and then get into professional. And they have to have people scouting them to offer them stuff. And sales engineers are no different. Like, you have to kind of find engineers, dig your well before you need it, so that when you need it,
Yeah, absolutely.
you don't spend like 6 months trying to hire an SE, which I've seen happen. And
Oh
then
yeah.
everybody's mad at you, especially when you're tied one-to-one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it has to be twofold. I mean, if your company is big enough to have the resources to do so, you should also have a kind of a trainee program or something going on, right? So the external recruiting is one thing in terms of hiring people from other companies, but you also have to look at developing talent inside the organization, and that's a big thing that we're focused on at the moment. Seismic is also growing an associate, we call it an associate sales engineer program, which is where you get, you come into the team, you are trained, and you get a lot of exposure. And then when the time is right, when there's an open spot, we can naturally move people into that. And we've had great success with that because it really helps fill a lot of positions from internal people as well as external people.
Yeah, I mean, one spot that people that I hear a lot of success is support, and bringing in people, scouting internally from your support teams, because they already know the product. They've worked with customers. They're good under pressure, usually. Some aren't. I've had one support guy yell at a customer for saying his name correctly. But yeah, like, internally, it's so much easier, and it's so much easier to hire someone to start in support, learn the product, and then move to sales engineering. It's just
and I think it's nice to provide a pretty good career trajectory for people and see sales engineering as a defined career trajectory that you can take, not just within that company, but eventually in the industry as a really good career path that you can get into. And we take people from a number of different departments. We take them from inside sales, from implementation, like you mentioned, support teams are good. Lots of different areas within the business will go through that path because they see a good level of progression in terms of the training that they'll get, but also the outcome, which is to be a successful, sales engineer at the end of it.
All right, David, it is time to move on to the not so fire round. These are the same four
Sure.
questions I ask almost every guest. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. And it's a not so fire round, so you can take your time answering.
The mildly sort of fizzling round. Yeah.
Barely. Like, it's hot round,
It's
summer.
tepid. Yeah. Okay.
You'll be fine. All right. The first question is, what do you love about sales engineering and also being a leader of sales engineers?
I mean, I say this like on a lot of the time is it's the best job in technology. Right? It's the job that combines so many different skills in one package. You have to be a good presenter. You have to have lots of good soft skills. You have to have technical skills. You have to be an excellent communicator. I mean, the list goes on. And I think it's the only job that I know of in technology anyway, where you get to combine all those things into one job, into one day job. And that's why I love being a sales engineer. I think it's just an amazing mix of the right skills, and it's a fantastic career, I think, as well.
And why did you leave that to go up the ranks?
Good question. I think I always have, the first company I was at where I had an opportunity to manage a team, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed being a part of other people's success, not just your own, being able to try to coach people and help people and bring up everybody in the aggregates. That's a very rewarding thing, as well as being successful in your own rights, I think.
I 100% agree. Like, I'm not a leader and I'm not an SE manager, but I've been coaching people, and I see the changes in their lives affect me a lot more than me selling the product to my customers. Because if I sell that product to my customers, guess what? Their life did not change at all. But as leaders, you can bring people up as sales engineers, change their lives, change their career trajectory. It's just, I don't know. I feel like it's so much more fulfilling than just selling equipment.
Yeah, it's extremely fulfilling. It's an extremely fulfilling thing to do, and hopefully something that I'm just on the start of my journey of, but at Seismic at least. But I'm really excited about it. I think that's a super rewarding thing to do.
Nice. So what would you change about the role?
What I change about the role? Good question. I think this is something that we're improving a lot at, but also maybe more of a product voice potentially for sales engineers. I know this is something that some companies do very well, some companies do very poorly, but sales engineers are an excellent voice and a resource for product ideas and for product management. And I think maybe I'm just being greedy. I think we do it pretty well already, but I just greedy in the fact that I think sales engineers could do more and help more with the product management ideas.
Do you think the individual sales engineers would want to do more? I mean, they have a full plate as it is. Do you think they would want to play in that arena as well?
Certainly, if their career aspiration is to become a product manager, I think they would. I think some sales engineers do definitely have aspirations to go into product management or product development. So yeah, they would. I think in the aggregate, you can definitely convince a sales engineering team that if they all kind of provide feedback with one voice to product management, then things are going to change favorably for their customers. So I think that's something you could definitely sell a sales engineering team on doing, I think.
Well, from my perspective, I don't really think about going into product management. I mean, if it happens, it happens, but I'm not actively seeking it. But I feel like if my goal is to help my customers, then I have a responsibility to talk to product management about my customers' needs. And if my goal is to sell more, then I have a responsibility to talk to product management to develop products that I could sell more of. So yeah, I think it is in NSE's best interest, no matter how you slice it, to actually participate in that.
No, I absolutely agree.
All right. Well, I love it when you do. So question number 3, as you can see, this is a really not so fire up. What resource do you recommend to your SEs that they should either read, watch, listen to, whatever? It's a must for your SEs if you have.
Great question. I'm a big book learner, and I do also run a book club for pre-sales, which we'll talk about in a second maybe. So I think there are some excellent books out there for sales engineers. There's the classics like the Demo to Win book, it's the classic of the genre. I think Chris White's 6 Habits of a Highly Successful Sales Engineer is an excellent starting point. You could look up a number of these type of books that I think really give you a solid footing in terms of being an SE. Other resources, obviously Pre-Sales Collective has grown massively in stature. I'm an ambassador for Pre-Sales Collective, and I think it's a fantastic initiative. So I think you should definitely get involved there. Even if it's just to network and connect with other people. Now that in-person networking is happening, I think that's a great resource as well. To learn and understand that there is a bigger community of sales engineers outside your company is just a great thing to start with.
Let me follow up on that. Is there a book that's not written specifically for sales engineers or sales that you felt had a positive impact on you as a sales engineer?
Yeah, definitely. There was one that we read last year, which is actually on my shelf behind me, in this book club that I run with the Pre-Sales Collective. It's a book called Range by David Epstein. And it's a book that talks about how it's basically disputing the famous 10,000 hours theory. So the theory goes that if you want to be a world expert or a master in something, you need to have 10,000 hours of deliberate practice in order to be good at it. But this book Range kind of disputes this idea and says that actually, even if you think that you have wasted your time, in inverted commas, by going down lots of different career paths or paths in your personal life that never amounted to anything, actually all of those experiences are valuable and useful. And, the majority of the most successful people in the world actually don't go down this singular focused path in terms of like how they can become successful. And I think it's a really good message for sales engineers, because sales engineers come to sales engineering from so many different backgrounds. It's crazy and I think it's a validation that the experiences you've had up until that point are all valuable and bring something to the table. And just because you've been a sales engineer for 1 year, you have 10 years of experience in other things. Those 10 years are not wasted. They're actually useful and really valuable when you become a sales engineer. So I think that would be my recommendation for sure.
That's so interesting. I work with a lot of people who want to become sales engineers but have self-doubt that but they've been in implementation, they've been in support, they've been in spots that like prepare you to SE, where you have to sell like a solution. Like, hey, you have this bug, we came up with this workaround. It's not ideal, but like you have to sell that, or implementation. So I love hearing that. All right, last question of the not so fire round, David. What habit are you working on today to improve in your personal or professional life?
Good question. I think a habit that I'm trying to work on, actually after reading another book, which is for our upcoming book club, there was a great chapter in there about how you should ask more questions. You should seek clarity by asking more questions. So when somebody, makes a statement or asks me a question, rather than just responding immediately and trying to kind of be efficient about it, if you like, just here's the answer, like let's move on. Going that level deeper, asking more qualifying questions, understanding a little bit more about what that person's really trying to do or where their question is coming from. I think that's going to help a lot in terms of gaining clarity of communication with people. So that's a habit I'm working on, trying to ask more qualifying questions.
Nice. All right, David, we're coming to the end of our show. Is there a question you were hoping I was going to ask you, but I didn't?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a nice one. I always like to ask at the end of demos. I say, like, is there anything you're expecting to see that you didn't see? No, you're a great host. I think you asked a lot of questions. I don't think we had a particularly scripted agenda, so there's nothing I don't think we missed. And yeah, it was just a good conversation. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. I asked this question in discovery calls as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a good one. It's a good one.
It works. I don't know why it works, but it works. All right. Last question of the day, David. Where can people reach out if they want you to recruit them or scout them?
Yeah, good question. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn a bit too much, probably. You can find me there. I think I'm the only David Ledger that is a sales engineer, so you should be able to find me. Connect with me, follow me, and yeah, that's probably the best place to find me.
Right. I'll put a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes, so it makes it easier.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, please do.
Thank you so much for your time, David.
All right. Thank you, Ramsey. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for coming on. It was a great pleasure having you here. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you learned a lot from it. And I've been saying this for a while the last few weeks, but if you do need help, I have the SE hotline. We just launched it back in April. We've been helping SEs, aspiring SEs become SEs, as those also learn how to be good SEs, and we're also helping SEs, experienced ones, get better and level up their game. There's this book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. I think that's the title of the book. Anyways, it's all about like doing the same thing that you've done to get to this point is not necessarily going to propel you to the next step of your career or to excel in whatever it is that you're doing. Check it out. It's at WeTheSalesEngineers.com. There's a bunch of buttons at the top at the menu. You can check join now. You'll see the services. You'll check the hotline and see what I actually do there. And if you have any questions, you can always book 15 minutes and ask me those questions personally. And I'm happy to chat with every single one of you as long as I have time. So there's a Calendly link there. You can click on it and you can book some time and we can chat about whatever it is that you want to chat about. So that's it for me for today. Again, thank you for being here, and I will see you later. I guess with that, this is me signing off.